In the Peruvian desert, about 200 miles south of Lima, there lies a plain between the Inca and Nazca valleys. Across this plain, in an area measuring 37 miles long and 1 mile wide, is an assortment of perfectly straight lines, many running parallel, others intersecting, forming a grand geometric form. In and around the lines there are also trapezoidal zones, strange symbols, and pictures of birds and beasts, all etched on a giant scale that can only be appreciated from the sky. These are known as the Nazca Lines. The designs are shallow lines made in the ground by removing the reddish pebbles and uncovering the whitish, grayish ground beneath. These lines, despite the method, still remain today despite the means for which the lines would be removed, including wind, rain, and erosion. The windless, dry, and isolated location of the Nazca Lines is home to hundreds of individual figures that are present there that range in complexity from simple lines to stylized hummingbirds, spiders, monkeys, fish, sharks, orcas, and lizards. The largest figures are over 200 meters across, or 660 feet. But what are they for? Who drew them? And why are they so giant to only be seen from the sky? Well, contrary to the popular belief that the lines and figures can only be seen with the aid of flight, they are visible from atop the surrounding foothills. The first mention of the Nazca Lines in print was by Pedro Cieza de Leon in his book of 1553, where he mistook them for trail markers. Interest in them lapsed until the Peruvian archaeologist, and I'm going to butcher his name, I apologize, Toribio Mejia Gespe, spotted them while he was hiking through the foothills in 1927. It was not until 12 years later, in 1939, that the lines were finally formally discussed in Peru. And then, 1 year later, in the years of 1940 and 1941, when serious study began. Now they are called the Nazca Lines, but there is evidence to tie for when they were made. Scholars have theorized that the Nazca people could have used simple tools and surveying equipment to construct the lines. Archaeological surveys have found wooden stakes in the ground at the end of some lines which support this theory. One such stake was carbon dated and was the basis of establishing the age for the design complex, connecting it to the time of the Nazca. Using the technology and tools available to the Nazca, scholar Joe Nickel, with careful planning and simple technologies and a small team of people, was actually able to reproduce the figures, and state that people could recreate even the largest figures within days, without any aerial assistance. However, there have been other people who have tested to see whether balloons were used to help in the construction, with individuals directing from above. Two people, Julian Knott and Jim Woodman, proved their theory by making a prehistoric balloon flight over the Nazca Lines. They used material available to the Nazca, simply cotton material, around 600 pounds of it, and burning logs for heating, along with a reed boat, known as a balsa, for the basket, which was only made of reed and twine. The flight, actually, was a success. Unfortunately, it only lasted about 2 minutes, though. Ultimately, it is skeptical to think that the Nazca may have had balloon technology, as there is little evidence in that specific area of the world. The only other hot air balloon technology of the time was all the way in China, with the Kongming lanterns, or sky lanterns, which were possibly used in signaling as early as the 3rd century BCE. However, their invention is attributed to the sage and military strategist Zhuge Liang in the 2nd century CE, so ultimately, evidence is very sparse. Returning to Nazca, what could possibly be the purpose of the Nazca Lines? Well, the Swiss writer Erich von Däniken even suggested that they had been built for the convenience of ancient visitors from space to land their ships. Another hypothesis is that the Nazca people created them to be seen by their gods in the sky. But another hypothesis by Paul Kossak, the first credited scholar of the Nazca Lines, along with Maria Reich, stated the lines were intended to act as a kind of observatory, to point to the places on the distant horizon when the sun and other celestial bodies rose or set in the solstices. However, it was concluded that there was insufficient evidence to support this claim. In 1985, the archaeologist Johann Reinhard published archaeological, ethnographic, and historical data demonstrating that worship of mountains and other water resources predominated in Nazca religion and economy from ancient to recent times. He theorized that the lines and figures were part of religious practices involving the worship of deities associated with the availability of water, which directly related to the success and productivity of crops. He interpreted the lines as sacred paths leading to places where these deities could be worshipped. The figures were symbols representing animals and objects meant to invoke the god's aid in supplying water. The precise meanings of many of the individual geoglyphs remain unsolved as of 2013. Supporting the water theory, David Johnson and Steve Mabey have advanced a theory that the geoglyphs may be related to water. The Nazca Plain is one of the driest places on Earth, getting less than 1 inch of rain a year. Johnson, while looking for sources of water in the region, noticed that ancient aqueducts, or prokios, seem to be connected with some of the lines. Johnson thinks that the shapes may be a giant map of the underground water sources traced on the land. Currently, Mabey is working to gather evidence that might confirm this theory. In another end of the theory spectrum, human sacrifice may have also been related to the Nazca Lines, with the discovery of a headless body. Human sacrifice and decapitation were part of powerful rituals that would have allayed fears by invoking the ancestors to ensure fertility and the continuation of Nazca society. The body is one of 8 found in the Nazca area, buried seated with no head. A ceramic jar painted with an image of a head was found next to the remains. The head on the jar has a tree with eyes growing out of it, making it seem likely that the sacrifice was part of a fertility ceremony. The heads were collected as trophies, for religious reasons compared to war trophies. The discovery of 2 small figures was announced in early 2011 by a Japanese team from Yamagata University. One of these resembles a human head, and is dated to the early period of Nazca culture or earlier, and the other, which is undated, is some sort of animal. The Nazca Lines still perplex people today, as new geoglyphs are discovered. In addition, there are other figures over landscapes outside the Nazca Lines in South America. About 850 miles south of the plain is the largest human figure in the world laid out upon the side of Solitary Mountain in Chile. The Giant of Atacama stands 393 feet high and is surrounded by lines similar to those at Nazca. Along the Pacific coast, in the foothills of the Andes Mountains, is etched a figure resembling a giant candelabrum. Further south, Sierra Pintada, which means the painted mountain in Spanish, is covered with vast pictures including spirals, circles, warriors, and a condor. But while investigations still continue through the years, preservations of these lines get more difficult as well, concerning threats of pollution and erosion caused by deforestation in the region. In 2013, it was reported machinery used in a limestone quarry had destroyed a small section of a line and caused damage to another. The Nazca people, and of course their lines, continue to be South America's most perplexing riddle in archaeology.